Alex Andrews is a sex worker with lived experience navigating the criminalization of consensual adult sex work. She is the co-founder of Swap Behind Bars, a national organization dedicated to supporting sex workers, trafficking sex workers, and people impacted by incarceration through advocacy, reentry services, and community-based support. For more than a decade, Alex has worked alongside women, men, and transgendered people with lived experience in both the sex trade and criminal legal system. She is committed to reducing the shame, stigma, and discrimination surrounding sex work by engaging directly with communities, policymakers, and anti-trafficking stakeholders. Whether speaking at town halls, conferences, or community forums, Alex uses her lived experience to challenge stereotypes and demonstrate that sex workers are members of every community. They deserve dignity, safety, and human rights. She's often described as a watchdog of anti-trafficking initiatives. Alex is known for thoughtful analysis of policies affecting sex workers and trafficking survivors. She is committed to building bridges across movements and advancing evidence-informed approaches that improve safety while respecting the voices of people with lived experience. In October 2022, Alex lost her partner of more than 25 years, Michael. His unwavering support helped shape both her personal life and her advocacy, and his loss has deepened her compassion and commitment to the work they both believed in. At home, Alex shares her life with two golden retrievers, Bella and Lexi, who remain her constant companions through the challenges and joys of her work. Welcome, Alex.
Well, hi. Thank you so much. That all sounds very lofty. What a wonderful guest you must be having today.
Oh, she's fantastic. I'll introduce you sometime.
Okay.
Oh, she is wonderful. Alex, why is this conversation important?
You know, I think that we are just at the crux of really fully understanding how our society has really reinforced the idea that adult consensual sex work is problematic, just kind of like they've decided that sex is basically problematic, regardless of what platform that you put it on. They've criminalized everyone into a corner, and we are really in serious danger of losing our right to do as we want when we want, and that is as an entire human race. That is as Americans. That's not just as sex workers. This conversation impacts everyone. Sex workers have always been the canaries in the coal mine. We have warned. We have given foreshadowings of storms to economic crisis to real estate booms, and we have been the harbinger of a lot of those kinds of things. And I think that it's time that people listen to us for our lived experience rather than what they think or what they might have seen in a movie.
Now, explain the various models to us. What is the Nordic model?
Well, there are four models of criminalization, one being full criminalization, which is what it is in most of the world. Everybody gets arrested. There's no discrimination. Then we have legalization, which is the polar opposite of that. That is very rare in a few cases, with the exception for Australia, Germany, a few counties in Las Vegas. Legalization is a completely different animal. Legalization means that someone has been licensed. They've signed documents. They've received consent forms. They've been fingerprinted at the sheriff's office. It's a completely different animal than the criminalized thing. It's the complete opposite of that. Then there in the middle, there is a proposed policy for the Nordic model. It has been enacted in several of the Nordic countries. In Switzerland, there are several places throughout the United States that have adopted it as policy in their law enforcement pursuits, but they haven't really put it into policy as a matter of this is the policy that works, and that is the Nordic model. It's also known as the Swedish model, the equality model, the entrapment model.
Why do they call it the entrapment model?
Well, the Nordic model is where law enforcement is supposed to be seeking the purchasers of adult consensual services, not the buyer or not the seller. So they're only looking for the buyers. And when they do that, obviously, if you're looking for buyers, you're going to be looking at the criminalized market they are seeking, which is sex workers. So by proximity, sex workers become part of that investigation. And that is not what is necessary in order to stay safe.
Why do people get these terms so confused?
Well, they both have the word decriminalization in them. And that just right off the bat confuses folks. Second of all, a lot of people misunderstand the Nordic model, and they misunderstand full decriminalization to the point that you can't even have a logical discussion with them about it.
What is the best approach in your opinion?
I think that you have to come forward with an open heart and an honest desire to hear the other person. I don't believe that there's any other way to come into this work, to come into this subject, than without a total respect for the amount of care and love that the people in it have put forth. You know, the leadership in this movement can be incredible. It can also be incredibly difficult to work with. We have to come to each other honestly, you know, and saying, you know what, the thing that I believe in, it's got some freaking flaws, you know. How am I gonna manage the way that I feel about this? And I think that is, you know, that is really the crux of the whole conversation. We've got to come to a better understanding of each other, and that's at every level in society.
Now, if we could make you queen, what model would you adopt?
I would invoke full decriminalization. Unfortunately, I don't know that if I were to invoke it as an individual, it would be effective, even though it would become law. We've seen a lot of laws that go into effect that don't necessarily make sense. So I would hesitate to say that if I were queen, I would make full decriminalization. I do think that would be the better policy. And as queen, I would certainly advocate for that. But I don't know that if I would instill that as a policy without debate among my constituents, for the love of God.
Now you've traveled a lot, and you're a scholar in this area, no question about it. Which countries provide, or let's say which jurisdictions or countries provide the strongest model? What is the strongest evidence for your cause?
The New Zealand Prostitution Reform Act of 2003 is an absolute example of the way that good legislation should be written, with the impact of the participants, with the voices of everyone who is impacted, and with reasonableness and cooperation with the government. This law has been so incredibly successful, not only at helping sex workers stay safe, but at helping people who wanted to leave get out. It's a really good model for us to follow. It's worked really well. The opponents don't understand it, and that is, I think, again, a failure to listen.
How does decriminalization make sex workers safer?
Reduces our exposure to the criminal justice system. When we are exposed to the criminal justice system, it's not just through maybe our direct arrest. It might be the arrest of those people around us, family members, friends, associates, those kinds of things. These third-party interactions can sometimes, or these third-party relationships, are often a little bit dangerous, you know, and so. Sex workers can sometimes become involved in stuff without realizing that that's what they're involved with. And that is what we call forced criminality. Not, you know, it's another version of human trafficking that they're not quite ready to acknowledge. And that is when you've got someone in your employee that is being forced to work, and it's criminal.
How should law enforcement interact with sex workers?
They shouldn't. When they call them, they should believe them, but they shouldn't go looking for them. We will come to you if there's a problem. We would love to. We've tried, and it's not really worked out to our benefit in the past. So we would love to build a relationship with law enforcement based on trust and mutual respect, where they took our complaints seriously. And when we tried to report murder, rape, assault, another one of us missing, that they would say, "Oh, listen, let's talk to you a minute. Let's find out a little bit more about this." But instead, we're just dismissed. So, thank you, no thank you.
What misconceptions have you encountered?
People misunderstand that the Nordic model is not giving kind of sex work anything goes, that kind of attitude. There's not a street light going up, there's not a sign going anywhere, there's not a new advertising service launched. Full decriminalization simply means the full removal of criminal and civil penalties for the buyer and the seller of a equal one-on-one exchange. It's not something where traffickers or exploitative partners or anything like that, it comes into effect. Those things are still illegal under full decriminalization. What it does is it gives that worker the opportunity to report that crime that is being held against them to law enforcement or to someone that they can trust so that they can get some assistance in getting out. Right now, it could very much well lead to their arrest.
Critics argue that prostitution is inherently exploitative. How do you respond?
It can be. They're not wrong. But the current model of the way things do things is also exploitative, just by the very nature of its discriminatory activities. Some people are victims, some people are survivors, some people are sex workers. The definition becomes only important when they go to get services. They're all victims. Everybody's a victim of trafficking until that person goes to get service and says, "No, I've been doing this of my own volition," and then suddenly they're not eligible for those same services.
Now, buying things is legal, selling things is legal. That's a contract. Mm-hmm. How can meaningful consent exist when we're dealing with poverty?
Generational poverty is at the root of pretty much everything evil in our society. But it is most definitely a precursor to exploitation, to violence in a community, to violence against women in particular. I think that is a very real concern.
Do you think decriminalization would increase demand?
I don't. I don't think it would increase demand. I don't think that the end demand format would either. I don't think that they truly understand how the economy works, and I think that is really what it took for me to understand. I actually used to support the Nordic model, believe it or not. I am someone who changed their mind. In 2012, I was teaching a class of people at the local jail. And the program director would kind of cherry pick students for my class, and he would bring them all in, and they would all kind of have a very similar history, prostitution, drug use, substance use, complicated families, domestic violence. All of these women, they kind of had these same circumstances going on, and I was so frustrated because every time I would get one into a good place, they would be arrested. And so I was like, yeah, hey, stop arresting them. Arrest the guys, arrest anybody else from them. I'll take anything at that point. And it sounded like a really good idea. End demand. That makes perfect sense. If the demand isn't there, why would they do it? That's the logic that's being used there. That makes sense. And then someone says, no, you don't understand. That just makes them more desperate because there's less available activity around it. And so they actually end up, that lowers the price. The economic theory of supply and demand is not actually based on the availability of services or products. It's not on the price of it, it's the availability. And I find that to be really a striking difference, because the end demand people are saying that if you reduce the demand, then the pimps will all say, oh, well, it's criminal now. We might as well just go home because we can't do this anymore. No, they become more violent and more demanding of the people that are under their control. So it actually increases the violence they're exposed to. It also lowers the price because any exploitative populations would say, you just got to do whatever you can to make that amount of money. And so they would have to do more work in order to meet that exploitative demand. So the Nordic model actually has an opposite effect as opposed to a positive effect on that.
Does it make it easier? Does trafficking become easier to conceal?
I don't think that it really has any impact on that. Again, we've found time and time again that exploitative situations and exploited people have been reported by the people who are experiencing that exploitation, by people close to them. Those things are never taken seriously. And those are the things that really matter.
Now, let's talk about something that could be considered the feminist divide. We're drawing from the now discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah, why has this become such a divisive issue in feminism?
Feminism has been, it's been in growth for a very long time. Feminism didn't just develop overnight. It started out in first wave feminism back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. It changed again during Prohibition. It changed again in the 70s and 80s. It has changed again. We're now into our fourth, fifth movement, something like that. And the debate is over what exactly do you have control over with your own body, I believe. Because, the strongest feminist argument has always been women have the control over their own body. They have autonomy. They have bodily autonomy. That was a tenet of faith. That was all in reference to abortion. And we do not apparently have the same courtesies extended to us when it comes to deciding to do adult consensual sex work. And as a result, there has become a great divide within the sex worker rights movement, as well as the certain feminist movements, more conservative feminist movements. The older feminist movements, like now, they just celebrated their 60th year in as a leader in feminist work in the United States. They have some very powerful positions, and they have a long history of discriminatory behavior against sex workers. And I really believe that feminists have the capacity to make a different decision. I think that it is possible for us to have movement on this issue, not only within feminism, but within the NOW organization specifically. And I think that now it's a critical time for them to understand their part in making sure that all women are heard, including the ones they don't like to hear.
Should sex workers themselves have a larger role in shaping policy?
Oh, good God, yes, absolutely.
How should sex trafficking survivors, how should they be represented?
They should be represented by trafficking survivors.
Perfect. How can these perspectives coexist?
By speaking to each other is a great place to start. We find, and this is something that has been studied, New Moon Network and the Reframing Health and Justice recently completed a project called Beyond the Binary. And it's completely interesting to find out that they brought together people from anti-trafficking as well as sex worker rights advocates. They brought them into the same room. They all had lived experience, and they were able to agree on most things. Most things. Everybody wants safety. Everybody believes there should be a pathway to justice. Everybody believes that nobody should, there are so many places where we can totally coexist and move forward, regardless of what belief in criminalization that you have. But now I believe has the opportunity to be very supportive of a group of women they haven't historically been that supportive of. And I believe now is an opportunity for them to change that.
Now, in many of the circles, trafficking is the largest schism preventing advancement of policy, how should, assuming we adopt one of these models, how should trafficking be investigated?
It should be investigated thoroughly. Trafficking is a very serious crime. I don't know why they think we're screwing around here. We want exploitative people, and unless I'm going to go down a road here, okay? Nothing has pissed me off more than the recent claims of the Nordic model proponents that their model would have somehow stopped the Long Island serial killer. Let's review. The Nordic model has co-opted this conversation, and it has really become a real thorn in my side. The biggest problem with this case is the Nordic model, because the fact that these sex workers, the drivers, their family members, they came forward to law enforcement to report these people missing, every single one of them. They were not listened to because they were sex workers, prostitutes, drug users, victims of domestic violence, whatever. They weren't listened to. So they didn't discover who the Long Island serial killer was for a very, very long time. This is an example of how the Nordic model doesn't work. He didn't need a stronger end demand message. He needed someone to listen to those girls while they were alive.
But now we're going to talk about licensing and workplace regulation. What role should they play?
Well, that's a real come down. About licensing?
Yeah. Should prostitutes, sex workers be licensed?
Well, that's under a legalization model. And I wanted to be clear, I don't oppose legalization. I don't have an opposition to that. But my primary goal is to increase safety for the people who are trading sex. Regardless of whether they identify as a sex worker or a survivor or a victim, it doesn't matter to me. I want them to be safe. So that is my number one priority. That may be different from, what another policy might be, but that is not going to create a safer environment for sex workers right away. I don't oppose it, and I believe that we could come to a world where brothels wouldn't be places of such stigma and such hostile activity, political activity. I think that legalization obviously has some benefits to some people. There are some people who really thrive in that environment. There are others who don't. You should not be forced to work in an environment of an industry that you don't like. You know what I mean? You just shouldn't.
How do we maintain or prevent the spread of sexually transmitted diseases in this context?
Freely offer condoms and free testing, and make sure that people have access to health care and education. As SWAT Behind Bars, I have run a lot of campaigns to ensure that condoms are accessible to those who need them the most. I know that there are free condoms available in almost every city nationwide, and they do everything they can to make sure that they are available and accessible to the people who need them the most. Condoms are the answer, always.
Should there be a requirement that they're used?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Which gender opposes these efforts the most? And I'm talking about decriminalization, legalization, or even the Nordic model.
I think that women have a instinctual dislike for this for this industry, but I think that women are more likely to be accepting, whereas I believe men are. I think men don't really pay a lot of attention to it.
Why?
I think that it doesn't really impact them.
I guess it does if they want a prostitute.
Well, but if they want a prostitute, do they care to look and see, I wonder what the local legislation is in my area? I don't really think that that's what they're looking for. Maybe I could be wrong.
What is the threat to women Why would a woman be threatened by this?
By, by adult consensual sex work or by full decriminalization?
We'll start with consent, I suppose. It's up to you.
I think that women occasionally feel uncomfortable with the idea of their husband being exposed to STDs, being unfaithful. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons that someone could be. It could be financial, it could be emotional, it could be, it could be the dude's fault. Who knows? The chances are that there's like one single reason is pretty limiting. I mean, I've met people who bought for all kinds of different reasons. I met people who sold for all kinds of different reasons, and I can't even begin to answer that question authentically. I don't know why.
Tell us about your organization.
SWAT Behind Bars is a national organization. We operate the National Sex Worker Hotline. It's a hotline, 877-776-2004. It's a number that sex workers can call and get someone to listen to them, possibly even help them with accessing some resources or at least directing them to where that they want to go. We're happy to take calls from sex workers, survivors. We'll help you navigate the terrain as you are seeking the safety that you are looking for.
And what do you do for them? How do you help them? How do you advocate?
I'm a case manager.
What do you do as a case manager?
I work directly with the people who are being released from prison. I help them get clothing, a smartphone, sometimes housing. Just help them re-entering society, getting them identification documents, a driver's license, a birth certificate, those things that often people walk out of prison without any of those kinds of things. While they're in prison, we help set them up with pen pals and Amazon wish lists so that people can purchase books on the outside for them. It'll be sent to them directly inside the prison. That's been an incredibly effective way for us to help people communicate more inside and out.
All right, so folks, don't call that hotline if you're looking for a sex worker.
No, don't.
Don't do that.
We can't help you there.
What is the most misunderstood concept dealing with this issue?
That all prostitution is trafficking and that no one could possibly consent to this work. I think that that's probably the big bugaboo. People just have a really hard time imagining what they imagine because it's been so predictably hyped in the media. People have this vision of this is what it's like, and that's just not the way it is. Sex workers exist on every level of society, and the chances that everyone knows a sex worker and just doesn't know they're a sex worker is more reflective of you than of me. Or of the sex worker. If someone doesn't feel safe to tell you what it is that they do for a living, then you're not a safe person.
How do we reduce the stigma?
Decriminalization.
Well, now it's decriminalized. You just waved your magic wand. It's decriminalized.
Yeah.
Once
we have it decriminalized, I believe that it'll take probably 5 to 10 years before the stigma begins eventually to start to wear off and start to be actually reduced. I could wave my magic wand and, wish, peace on earth and fairy dust to everyone, and they're not going to get it, without a little bit more effort on my part. So it's going to take a lot more than simply passing a law, whether it be Nordic model or whether it be full decriminalization. It's going to be a while before people really know what's going to happen as a result of that. And why can't we just study where it's been successfully implemented? Give that a shot instead of coming to something that is so deeply divided. Let's just try it.
Is that a practical goal?
No.
It's not a practical. What is a practical goal?
You gave me a wand and you said wave it,
and you waved it wonderfully. You waved it wonderfully. Oh heavens! What is a practical goal? Policy is often changed incrementally. What is the first step?
The first step is to acknowledge that sex workers exist and are perfectly capable of advocating for ourselves, and we should be included in this conversation.
And then what is the second step?
all prostitution is not trafficking. I really think that those are the things that I want to. We come in peace. We come to you in peace.
I'm watching an alien UFO coming down saying, "We come in peace."
We are here to help you walk this road, to walk this road with you. And we are, because it is a difficult transition. And we understand that. People have spent decades advocating for the Nordic model, not understanding that it don't work. Or maybe they understood and just didn't want to believe it. But one way or the other, it has created harm, fear, and just increased more violence against sex workers and against survivors of trafficking because our lives are intersected.
States are very practical laboratories. We can experiment with public policy. What state would you start with?
New York.
Wow, why New York?
I think that New York has the best chance of sex workers thriving there. That particular community is so flippin' strong. I would love to see them achieve that. I do believe that it's possible, even probable in Vermont, New Hampshire.
Okay, so you're
I
staying
think that some of the Northeast. I know there have been a lot of efforts in Oregon, and they are such good efforts, and they're just having a really hard time making ground. And it's because the feminists are pretty much intertwined with the anti-trafficking / evangelical / So you mix all that stuff together, and you get a real pink patriarchy situation.
Explain the pink patriarchy to me.
Oh, the pink patriarchy is what I call feminism, the feminism of now. That exclusive over 60, and I'm over 60, so it's fine. A view that I'm just switching who gets the handcuffs. It's carceral feminism. They hate that. They hate the idea of carceral feminism. But the fact is if you want to see handcuffs snapped on somebody to solve a social problem, you are a carceral feminist.
How do you approach your opponents? What type? How do you begin that conversation? It makes a lot of people very nervous.
It does. I have become unwelcome in some circles because of that, I think.
Really?
I don't really miss much of an opportunity to talk about human rights when I have the opportunity, because it's just so blatantly obvious in my purview. When I see it, I got to call it.
So how do you approach the conversation if assuming you're not in a convention discussing this issue?
Yeah,
if I'm sitting there having coffee, how do you approach that? You say, "What do you do for a living?" And I say, "I host a podcast." What do you do?
What kind of podcast?
Okay.
I would redirect the question to be questions about you.
And then if I say, "What do you do for a living?"
I host a podcast also.
There you go. Okay. I love that. I absolutely love it.
I work for the IRS. I've also used that a lot.
That'll scare them.
Yeah.
Talk about a way to shut down a conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, I work for the IRS.
Works really well.
Give me the strongest argument you can muster for the Nordic model. Play devil's advocate.
Fewer women might get arrested, but more family. Oops.
And why do you think that argument falls short? In your opinion, why does it fall short for you?
Well, unfortunately, and it's not my opinion, it's what's actually happened. Under Nordic model implementation, we have found that it creates more victims. When you break up families by humiliating one of the participants, when you break up that family, alienate children, alienate the primary breadwinner who may lose their job as a result of it, resulting in loss of housing, transportation, accessibility, insurance, all of those things, we've seen families become homeless. As a result of that, and the person who was accused of this, horrific crime under the Nordic model has had to be on a sex offender list.
Now, I could hear a Senate subcommittee member saying, "How do you distinguish consensual work from coercion on the field, in the field? How does law enforcement, how do policymakers make that?" How do
You
they
don't
distinguish?
believe us when we come to you, tell you it's problematic.
Okay.
That's the answer to that question. You don't need to look for it. We will come to you with it. And we have reliably held this information. We have reliably told. We have tried to report at times. We do not trust police. And I tell people that every day. Do not trust them. You cannot trust them.
Let's bounce into ethics for a second. If a person enters the sex worker trade because of severe financial hardship, is that considered free choice?
It's coercion under capitalism. Who are you going to arrest for that?
The Fed?
You don't. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. You can't say, well, but this work is harmful. Well, walking down a flight of stairs is harmful. Bending over and picking something up at Walmart is harmful. Working in a coal mine is harmful. Doing lawn care is difficult. People are exploited in the beauty industry. People are exploited in the pageant industry. I mean, I've written books about this kind of thing. Harm exists in every industry. Harm exists because it exists. You don't make it better by criminalizing one portion of it.
Yeah.
Ever.
I get that.
Ever in the history of man has that worked.
Should there be, let's assume we're going to start incrementally and we're going to start regulating. What policies would you put in place for that regulation? Would it be STD? Would it be a department to investigate to ensure there is that these ladies aren't being trafficked? How do you approach that issue? Because that's a big issue. I
would start, my very first thing would be to include immunity for anyone who reported violence, exploitation, anything like that. I would make sure that I publish that policy out loud and up front so that people knew what it was. And that solves the rest of my problems.
Should we criminalize, I'm going to use the word pimping for my ignorance.
It is
Should we criminalize pimping?
It is criminalized.
I mean, with the changes in your policy, you've already waved your magic
I haven't done
wand.
anything. I haven't done anything to trafficking policy. All I've done is decriminalize the adult worker and the buyer. I'm not interested in legitimizing exploitative people.
Right. So, assuming it's been decriminalized and the pimping continues, how do you protect the girls?
The worker would be free to report. She would be able to report that she was being exploited. Chances are they would already know. They would already know that it had already been reported.
Are there any aspects of the Nordic model do you think are worthwhile?
They just started tacking on a section about helping people leave with resources and stuff like that, and I haven't really. It was kind of tacked on last minute, so I haven't really had a chance to review how encompassing that is. But so far, what we've seen from the implementation of Nordic model policing activity, shall we say, that is where the police say that is what they are seeking to do, but oops, look, we accidentally arrested a whole bunch of sex workers as well. But I think that immunity is the first thing that we would want to put into effect. People knew.
Now, most issues have something that everyone can agree on. I mean, there are clash of absolutes. I don't think this is necessarily one of them. What issue can all sides, or nearly all sides, agree upon now?
That everybody wants people to be safe.
Okay, I like that.
You know,
I like
everybody
that a
wants
lot.
people to be safe, and that is true regardless of which side of. And I hate even the word sides because it implies that there are sides and there shouldn't be. But that is the thing that we are so similar in so many different ways. We all want safety for each other. We all believe that workers, survivors, we should have the power to report. We should have access to resources. If we want to leave, somebody should be there to help us. We should have assistance. Who better than to help you leave than someone who has experience doing it? I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if we look at the criminal code in most states, there are protected classes: 65 and older, children, the mentally disabled. Should sex workers be a protected class? Let me explain just a little bit. If somebody hires a sex worker and puts them in a compromising position and then injures them, do we work with the existing laws on battery or assault, depending on which state you're in? Or is there an accelerating factor there?
I don't actually know. I've never been asked that question, and I don't actually know the answer to it, and I wouldn't want to make up something on the fly for something that's serious. But that would be something that would be interesting to investigate. It doesn't sound illogical, but it sounds problematic for some reason, and I'm not sure why.
Okay, well, maybe we could follow up on that. I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
Alex. That is perhaps the most honest answer I've ever gotten from somebody. I mean, that's phenomenal. No, I don't know is a wonderful answer. It really is. There's always an expectation that somebody just thinks on a fly. We never went that direction.
Oh,
Alex,
I'm not much of that.
what do you want people to... somebody watching this interview, what do you want to stick in their minds?
Take a deep
Tie it up.
breath.
Take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath, and do your own research. I mean, everybody gets the same results. You know what I mean? It's not. This is not mystical work. You know, none of it's hidden away from view. The studies are available to anyone who wants to go look them up. How they've been interpreted, you know, that's entirely different. Listen, I am not trying to get individuals to change their mind about how they feel about anything this complicated in an interview or a conversation. My goal is to change their mind about listening and learning.
Alex, you get the final word. The floor is yours.
We're all going to be stronger if we work together.
Ooh, very philosophical. I like that. Alex, thank you so much for participating and being here. We're really grateful.
You bet.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.